Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to welcome you to the launch of the CINECA webinar series. Today, we're very pleased to have with us Thomas Kean, the CINECA coordinator, and he'll introduce the CINECA project to us, focusing on addressing bottlenecks in cohort data analysis. My name is Vera Matzer, and I'm involved in the CINECA project on behalf of EMBL EBI. I'll be hosting the webinar today and manning the question functions. Before I introduce the speaker, I want to make you aware that the webinar is being recorded, and that includes the question and answer session at the end. In a few days' time, we'll make the video and the slides available on the CINECA YouTube channel and also on the CINECA and EBI website. We've reserved some time at the end of the session for questions and answers. What I'd like to ask you is to type your question into the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll take them at the end. Thomas Kean is the CINECA coordinator and team leader for the European Genome Phenome Archive, EGA, and the European Variation Archive, EVA, here at the EBI. He's responsible for the strategic planning of both and is a member of the GA4GH steering committee. He also co-leads the large-scale genomics workstream. And before joining the EBI's team leader in 2016, Thomas led the sequence variation infrastructure group in the computational genomics program at the Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute. His research interests are in using genomic technologies to understand biological processes, with a particular focus on rodent models for human disease. He's the scientific lead for the Mouse Genomes Project, a collaboration with the Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute. He also holds an honorary professorship at the University of Nottingham. And at this point, I'll hand over to Thomas.
All right, great. Welcome everyone to the webinar about CINECA, and thanks to Vera for that introduction. So I guess I should start with a little bit of context, but first of all, to say actually what does CINECA stand for? So the CINECA is an acronym for the Common Infrastructure for National Cohorts in Europe, Canada, and Africa. And I guess the background for the CINECA project, I mean, you can see from this map in the slide here that we've seen the emergence of many sort of very large-scale human cohorts over the last 40 to 50 years for different diseases, different contexts, longitudinal, disease-specific, common disease, rare disease. And ultimately it's really to identify genetic associations and be able to identify new targets for treatments. This is quite a nice map that was my colleague at EMBL EBI developed last year to kind of map out where are the cohorts. And one of the interesting features you'll see is that we're starting to see the emergence of really large-scale genomic sequencing, primarily sequencing or genotyping-based projects that is coming from national healthcare initiatives. And I guess how did we get here? We've seen the rapid sort of development of genomic and genetic technologies in the last sort of 10 years, and we're going through this transition at the moment where very soon, or is already happening, the vast majority of genomic data will be generated through healthcare. And some of the features about that sort of scenario, as opposed to purely research-based projects, is that this data won't be as freely shared as purely sort of research data has been shared in the past. It will have jurisdictional restrictions on export. It will have enhanced data security requirements. And all of this kind of leads us into a scenario where we're going to be looking at kind of federated solutions to enable access and data sharing for genetic data going forward. Okay, so I said that one of the kind of fundamental principles behind CINECA is to be able to kind of enable and build the standards and do a large-scale deployment of a federated solution, for accessing and sharing genetic data and phenotypic data from large-scale cohorts. Ultimately, what we want to do in CINECA is we want to build a federated system to enable population-scale genomic and biomolecular data accessible across borders, and to essentially accelerate research and improve healthcare. The fundamental basis for CINECA is that we're going to assume that the data cannot be exported, maybe, and that we have to look at a federated solution. There's a whole set of challenges around that. that we will try to address during the CINECA project. And I guess for the rest of this talk, I'll try and talk through some of those challenges and how we're going to try to address them. The project obviously has just started in at the January this year, so it's a 4-year project. So there will be, there are many challenges and many standards that need to be developed or we will be participating in, and I'll talk through some of those. Okay, so what are the cohorts that we're going to be working with? One of the unique features of the CINECA project, and again, well, one of the unique features and challenges is that, we're going to be working with cohorts that are based in 3 different continents. So we've got a set of Canadian cohorts, a set of European cohorts, and we're going to be working with the H3 Africa BioNet project as a substantial African cohort. So we've got a whole selection of different types of cohorts. Some of them are longitudinal, some of them are disease specific, some of them are longitudinal and disease, some of them are just population controls. And I think when you count up the 11 cohorts that we're going to be working with, I think it comes to over 1.4 million participants across those cohorts. And I guess obviously one of the first kind of challenges that comes to mind here is that you're going to be working with there's going to be a significant LC challenge, ethical and legal challenges here, because we're working across different jurisdictions with different regulations in those different countries and continents, and that's certainly going to be a significant component of the CINECA project. Okay, so if we were to break it down in terms of what are the challenges? So I mean, we had to structure the project in some sort of logical way. You break down the challenge of federating data access into a set of kind of logical challenges. The first one would be, well, how do you find cohorts of interest? I mean, if you're a researcher working in heart disease, how do you find cohorts that would have the appropriate participants with the appropriate measures that have been collected in data dictionaries and phenotypes to be able to do kind of cross cohort research in your area? So federated data discovery by genotype, by phenotype, maybe by data use is one of our work packages. The next step, given that you've found the data you're interested in, how do you actually get permissions to access it? How do you identify yourself as a researcher to the cohort repository? How do you present your credentials? This whole idea of this authentication and authorization and trying to get harmonization of that is another significant challenge. Assuming you've got access to the cohort data, then you're presented with a whole set of phenotype variables. You want to do some sort of cross-cohort analysis that involves using those phenotype variables. They need to be harmonized in some way so that you can actually ask, semantically harmonized, so you can actually ask questions across those cohorts based on the phenotypes. So we have a significant phenotype and data dictionary harmonization work package. Ultimately, we have to look at why we're doing the CINECA project. We really want to enable sort of, federated analysis applications, so research applications, things that are straightforward to do when you've got all the data in a single place. But when you're working in a federated scenario with cohort data in different locations, become much more challenging. And there's a set of those applications that I'll talk about in a few slides that we're going to try to do in a federated context, and a set of research applications as well. And then finally, we can't underestimate the LC challenge here. There's regulations in Canada, we've got a GDPR in Europe, and we've got a framework through the H3 Africa BioNet project for accessing data and sharing data, and we have to try and figure out how we can harmonize across those to enable so that the LC challenges don't become a blocker essentially to try and to research across these cohorts. Okay, so I'll just kind of go through in a little bit more detail then on some of those challenges and the potential solutions. I guess if you just start from the start, well, we have a set of data sources, a set of cohorts, they're biobanks, they're public resources in all these different locations in different countries and different continents. Here's a summary of the cohorts that we're going to be working with in the project. You can see there are different different data types have been collected. Some of them have genetic data, some of them have genomic data, some of them don't. the phenotypes have been collected at different times. They're different, probably, different assays, and there's a significant kind of harmonization of the metadata that needs to be. That's one of our significant work package 4, I think. Maybe it's 3, I've forgotten. So yeah, so there's a listing of the cohorts here. A lot of these, there will be genetic data and genomic data generated in the next few years. This project runs for 4 years, and I think the point here is that the data sizes are quite large, and it won't be possible, in many cases, to export that data or just to be able to just copy it across to local analysis platforms. And this is one of the driving use cases for the federated solution that we will have in CINECA. Okay, our second work package is about this authentication and authorization interoperability. So, we've got a set of different permission systems and data access systems across these cohorts and across the continents. In particular, we're going to be working with the CANDIG, which is a distributed genomics platform in Canada that's connected to some of our cohorts. They've got a permission system. In Europe, we've got the Elixir AAI system. That's connected to or will be very soon connected to the EGA permission system. And then, of course, in Africa, we've got the History Africa Bionet system. And we want to be able to essentially, for a researcher to be able to come along to be able to apply for access, to be able to present their credentials, their researcher identifier, in a way that doesn't involve, sending faxes around or emails. We want this to be in a much more automated kind of way. I mean, at the moment you can use your Facebook account to log into different, any set of different websites, but the technologies are there to do this. But we need to basically formalize that for research and to be able to get integration of the systems, the permission systems and the access systems, so that a researcher can come along. They've got some sort of researcher identity that says what their institute is, what their affiliations are, what other data sets they've already got access to. That can be recognized then by one of the other the cohort owner, essentially, or the platform running that the cohort exists on. And then they can decide, basically. They could also present things like, what's their data use? How do they want to use the cohort data as part of this AAI integration? So, I think this is one of the probably the most significant challenges for enabling access to human data. And I think it's, I think if we could really if we can get these different AAI systems integrated, I think this will be a really great result from the CINECA project. Okay, work package 3, again, I mentioned this earlier, is about cohort level metadata representation and harmonization. Again, we have got a whole set of different cohorts, different diseases, different contexts, different coding systems, different data dictionaries, and to be able to put some sort of semantic layer over those phenotypes and all their variables, to be able to do cross-querying across all of these cohorts. That will be a significant activity, and I think this is a challenge for any kind of cohort integration project. I mean, I think that probably the solution at the moment is to get a postdoc and put them sitting at a computer for an entire year to try and do harmonization across a set of cohorts in order to be able to do their GWAS application. We're going to try and scale this approach to come up with a way of come up with ways of actually harmonizing across the phenotypes across the cohorts that we're working with in automated kind of ways. Okay. Our next work package is about federated data discovery. Again, I mentioned this. I mean, essentially is how do you identify the cohorts of interest for your particular research question, your particular disease context, or maybe the cohorts that have the variables that you're interested in comparing to make, maybe disease associations. There are a set of standards out there for doing this. Things like the Beacon network, the Mathematical Exchange. We've now recently got the data use ontology, which is a way of mapping consent agreements into an ontology that kind of describes what researchers can do with data sets, what kind of research can be carried out across those cohorts. And then obviously a researcher can come along with their data use, code it into this ontology, and then present that to the cohort. And it's in theory, a much faster way to be able to decide if the research is applicable for that cohort based on the consent agreements. So yeah, we're going to try and enable this federated data discovery by genotype, phenotype, and data use. To enable, basically make it faster to discover the samples of interest and the cohorts of interest. Okay, assuming we've achieved these first three work packages, well, we have to look at ultimately why are we doing all of this federated access and integration. I mean, ultimately it comes down to we want to enable a set of research applications. So, while it might be quite straightforward to do things like a GWAS analysis on when you've got all the data on your computer or on your compute cluster, or it might be very straightforward to do things like multi-sample genetic variant calling or EQTL analysis. But when the data is physically not in the same place and it's spread across different locations, and you need to bring your algorithm to the data, that introduces a whole new set of technical challenges around those research applications. So we've picked, as I said, three particular applications that are obviously quite straightforward locally, but we're going to try and do demonstrations of federating those across a subset of our cohorts. Okay, and then obviously the other side of this is ultimately we want to enable a set of clinical applications from the project. So I think we're looking at two particular clinical applications, maybe being able to use evidence from the federated network for diagnostic services. I think we're looking at maybe doing some biomarker prediction, but ultimately these work package 4 and work package 5, these two applications work packages, they're building on the products of those first three cohorts. So I think it's they're ultimately demonstrating what you can do if you get all of this federation and integration of the systems and cohort harmonization done. Okay, good. And I should say then, obviously, we've got a set of really key supporting work packages. We've got two ethical and legal LC work packages, 7 and 9. We've got a comprehensive outreach training and dissemination work package, which this webinar is a product of, I guess. And then we've got an overarching project management and coordination work packages to support the overall project. Okay, who are the partners involved in the project? I think in this slide here, we've tried to put the partners in the context of, the kind of things like standards organizations, interoperability initiatives, biobank networks, and we've got some SMEs, and you can see it is quite, we have representation in a set of kind of key organizations across Europe, across global standards organizations, and in Africa as well. So, I think it is a really well represented and kind of, highly engaged set of partners who are kind of, aware of the kind of global context for the project. And have a focus as well on the applications that we want to enable from the project. Okay, I said that one of the key aspects of the project is we do want to align with international standards for human data exchange. One of the groups that we're quite highly engaged with is the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. This is the standards organization that's emerged in the last few years to essentially, define kind of standards for exchanging human data, things like researcher IDs, things like, the transmission of data in secure ways across to enable access. This idea of being able to federate analysis, where you bring your algorithm to the data, trying to build all the standards around that, and I think that's the GA4GH has become sort of the kind of de facto kind of organization for genomics and standards, I think, in the last few years. So we'll be really highly engaged in that group. In some ways, we're going to use the CINECA project as, in some ways, it's a driver project for the GA4GH. We're going to be doing deployments at scale, I guess, of the GA4GH standards. Some of the standards that have already come from GA4GH, like the Beacon network, the data use ontology, we're already looking to deploying those in CINECA. And we have in terms of Europe and Europe specific, we have a whole set of Elixir nodes are involved in the project. We're going to leverage off the Elixir AAI. And we also have representation from the BBMRI biobank network in Europe as well. Okay, it's worth putting the project in some context. There is increased interest in getting cohort interoperability, especially now that we're starting to be able to generate very large genomic data sets from human cohorts. There is some of the initiatives that have recently appeared. Maybe one is the International 100K Cohorts Consortium, the IHCC. They have very similar goals to the CINECA project. Many of the cohorts involved in CINECA are also part of the IHCC network. And essentially, they're trying to build a global translational network that will utilize some of the largest cohorts to be able to enable these kind of research applications and clinical applications. Another group that's recently emerged is the Common Disease Consortium. I guess they're slightly more focused maybe towards GWAS and trying to achieve this kind of multiple million participant GWAS kind of scale. And again, we have some representation in the CINECA group that's also part of the Common Disease Consortium. And then, of course, all of this is backed by all of these emerging national and regional healthcare genomics initiatives, which, ultimately we hope that, by aligning with the GA4GH standards, that we will be able to have interoperability with some of these initiatives. And we do meet with many of these initiatives through the GA4GH, the National Initiatives Program. And then, of course, there are many large research cohorts, UK Biobank being one that is a participant in this project, and there are several others of those that are now starting to look at generating genomic data sets. Okay, in terms of, we want your input. We're interested in, one of the outreach goals of the outreach package is to get stakeholder input from the users of the potential users of the products of CINECA, the needs analysis. We realize that we don't know everything about cohorts. Although we have quite some good expertise in cohorts and working with cohorts, but we don't know everything. So we really want to get your input. So we have a survey that's available at the moment, and we would love to get input on that survey. We will have a quite comprehensive training program. We're hoping to have webinars from every time we submit one of our deliverables to the EC, which will document how we approach a particular piece of work, maybe the cohort metadata harmonization or the AAI integration. We will plan to have a corresponding webinar. So there will be over the next 3.5 years, there will be we hope this will be the first of many webinars from the CINECA project. We'll have some face-to-face training courses. There's online training courses that will appear. Much of this will be, I guess, coordinated through the EBI Train Online portal, maybe other places, yeah. And staff visits is something that we can accommodate as well. And certainly Vera will be one of the people to contact on this side of the project. We should acknowledge the funding. I mean, CINECA is one of the Horizon 2020 projects funded through the EC. There's also some funding from the Canadian Institutes for Health Research that's co-funded the project. And I think this project would not happen without the funders. Okay, I think we've got time for a set of questions. So how does that work? Do we put them in the box?
Yes, so thank you, Thomas. And we do have time for questions. So if you would like to ask a question, what I will ask is for you to please type it into the question window of GoToWebinar, and then we can go through them. While you do that, we've got a couple of questions to get started with. So normally for our webinars, when you register, you're also able to submit questions in advance if you want. And as I said earlier, all of our webinars are recorded, and we'll make both the recording and the slides available in the next few days. So as a first question, Thomas, how can groups or individual researchers get involved in CINECA?
Yeah, I think, we will have, as I said, we will have quite a comprehensive outreach package. And I think, there's a lot of lessons and expertise that can be learned from the project. We've already had some outreach that we've done early on in the project, where we've given some talks and done some stakeholder analysis. And, I think one of the feedback we've got from many other cohort owners or people who run cohorts is that they're really interested in, how do you do, say, things like, cohort level phenotype harmonization? How do you actually do that? So I think this is really where the idea for having these webinars from all the technical work packages came from. So I think in terms of learning from how we are approaching many of these problems. I think the webinar series will be really important. There'll be some stakeholder analysis, I guess. This, certainly providing input on the survey will be great, because that really points us to what do people want to get from the project. How in terms of the involvement that people would like to have from the project.
Okay, thank you. So you also showed the slide where the research applications and clinical applications are going to be built on top of the first 3 work packages. Do you have a kind of estimated timeline of when you expect those to become available?
Yeah, it's quite clear the way the project is structured. The research applications and the clinical applications, they can't really happen in some sense. We can plan for them, but they can't actually start to happen until some of the things like the data discovery, the phenotype harmonization, the AI integration. In some ways they need to happen first to basically set the platform up, for those applications to come along. So I think in the way the project is structured at the moment, I think it's probably, it's maybe from about 18 months maybe onwards. Year 2, going into year 2 is when those applications really will start to kind of be built on top of the underlying platform that's being, the work package 1, 2, 3, which are really activating early on.
Okay, thank you. If there are research groups out there that, rather than just learn from the project, also want to get involved on particular aspects of the content in a more collaborative way, are there approaches for that, or would that be possible?
I think, I think it certainly will be possible, because the goal of this project is to enable interoperability. So all of these cohorts that we're working with, they're all open to any researcher to apply for access and to use in their own research, because we're not the cohort owners. We're just trying to enable basically interoperability. So all of the interfaces that we build that are put over the cohorts for federated applications, the AI integration, all of those interfaces, they're value add essentially to those cohorts. So in some sense, what we want from the project is actually to in some sense make the cohorts even more interoperable than they currently are, using standards that are coming from the sort of international standards bodies, so that inherently the cohorts become more interoperable, and which will then enable obviously other researchers to be able to use those cohorts in their own research also.
So while we give you a minute to type additional questions, we'd like to just put the slide up for you to see how you can keep informed of CINECA news and upcoming event. So we've recently launched our Twitter feed at CINECA Project. We've also got a LinkedIn company page where we'll initially be announcing events like this, the webinar series, but also when we start organizing our staff visits and our face-to-face events. We're imminently launching the website as well, where you'll be able to look at updates from the project, what the plans are. So the website is live at the moment, and we'll be extending that across the next couple of weeks. Now, as Thomas already indicated, this webinar series is going to be a regular event. We're currently planning the schedule for the kind of summer, so we'll have a little bit of a break over the summer months, since a lot of people will be away. But we'll keep going. Exactly. We need to get some work going. But basically, while that is kind of ongoing, what we want to do as well is organize some webinars with some of the key players, and introduce some of the work that CINECA will actually be building on. So we would say stay tuned, and from kind of September, we expect the webinar series to happen very regularly. Initially, we'll aim for once a month probably, and then depending on how active the CINECA researchers are, that may ramp up at some stage. So if there are no more questions, then I would like to thank Thomas for the webinar and everyone for attending. The webinar will be available online in a couple of days, and we'd say stay tuned and stay with us for the next couple of years. Thank you.
Great. Thanks everyone for attending.